Hello, it's Fun with Fiber and I'm Dolores Jacobs. Today I want to show you how you can wind a warp without a warping board using simple things that you have in your house. And those simple things are a couple chairs. What I've done is taken one chair and placed another one upside down on top of it. And I have another set of chairs at the far end of my room. What you can do is use the legs of the chairs as your warping board. So I'm going to take this yarn down to the other set of chairs and tie it on to the far leg. And then I'm going to pull these chairs so that that line is taut. Now that I have my chairs set up, I can start using the yarn that I'm going to be weaving with. This is 10-2 cotton, and to start the warp, I'm going to tie this on to the leg of the chair. These legs are going to create my cross. So I'm going to the outside of this first leg around the end of this leg, and then this time I'm going to the inside of this leg around the outside of this leg, and that's creating my cross right here between the two legs. So every time I go this direction, the line will be on the outside of this leg. When I come back, it's on the inside. I cross it over and back again. I need a total of about 500 ends. So I'll be walking back and forth to create this warp. So to make this warping go twice as fast, I'm going to do 2 yarns at one time. I've tied them both to the end of the chair. I'm going to separate them with my finger so that they don't get tangled, and start warping. So as you can see, this will very easily create a nice warp. However, if you don't have the space, let's say you wanted to do a warp that was 10 yards. Well, a lot of places there aren't 10 yards worth of space to put your chairs out, and that's going to be a lot of walking. So what you can do, we'll move the chairs closer together. Take this warp off, and I have my guide string so I know the size that I need. Tie it onto the one leg, and then just like a regular warping board, you want to set up a pattern. So if I bring this here, around this leg, back over here around this leg, and here. I need to back this up slightly so I have the right length, and to tie it onto the end of the chair here. Now, instead of walking so far back and forth, I can stand just as I would at a regular warping board and warp using the legs of this chair. So I've set up my pattern down around the last leg, around this leg. You could use any pattern that fits the size of the warp that you want to make. So I've got my two chairs closer together. I'm going to take the two cones of yarn, and I have a small stool here that I'm going to set them on. We'll tie them onto this leg once again. I'm just going to follow the same pattern that I did to establish the width. When I get to the end here, I'm just going to come around, back, following the same line. And then when I get to this leg, I want to go to the inside. Then the outside of this leg, that's going to give me the cross in between these two legs. Back again to the outside. And I'm pulling it taut, and also I'm going to be pushing down on these threads so that I get a good measure. So I'll continue doing this until I have my warp. When I'm winding this warp, it's a little bit too wide to do as one full warp chain. If you try to do it too wide, when you're putting it on your loom, it's going to cause problems in getting it tensioned. So depending on the thickness of the yarn that you're using, will decide on how many ends per braid you end up doing. I'm taking, it's going to be about 500 ends, so I'll just divide that probably in 3. As I go, I don't count each one as I go because I found I always lose track. So what I'll do is wind for a while and then count out how many I have. We've got 2 for every time that I go back and forth, and then I would count in sets of 2 how many ends I have. When I get to 25 ends, I'll put a string around that group to mark it. And then I leave the rest of the yarn dangle. When I get another 25 ends, I'll tie off that group. That way I have a better idea how many ends I have as I'm going. I just wanted to show you the pattern that I use to warp. Instead of taking this same hand and going around this leg to the back and around, back, around, and back. If you watched the mechanics of doing this, I'm going back and forth all the time, and that eventually will tire my back. So I want to show you the easier way to do it. When you're on the left side of the warp, use your left hand. So you come around this leg, and then when I'm over here, I'm using my right hand. Back to my left hand, and my right hand. I do try to push the threads down so that I'm getting an accurate measure. If your threads are at different levels all the time, some of it's going to be longer, some of it's going to be shorter. With this chair method, it's not precise, where on a warping board, it's more precise. But you can still help it by keeping the threads as close together as you can. Also, you want each thread on top of the next one. Don't cross over it. Don't come underneath and up. That will affect the length of your warp and it will tangle it. So you always want to keep the next thread in order above the one prior to it. And then I wanted to show you how I count the warps. So I'm going to count how many warp threads I have. And for every one I count on this side, there's another one on the back side here. So each one is actually 2. I'm going to tie it off for every 50 warp threads that I have. So I take this, just a scrap piece, fold it into a U, circle it, and then pull this through. So that captures 50 warp threads. And I'll continue doing that. And there we have another 50. So what I'll do is take this thread and just wrap it around this bunch, just once around, and leave it hang, and then do the next 50. And there's another 50. So I just take this and loop it around again. So now I know each time this is looped around, that's 50 threads. So that's 150. On this warp, I've done 200 ends, and I just want you to take a look. See how this is loose here and down, and this is a little bit tighter. This is the problem with trying to get the warp measured with the chairs. It's slowly slipping down, so the ends that are down here are going to be a little bit longer than the ones up here. I can still work with that. For using something free that's in your house, the chairs are going to work out pretty well. If I had it on a warping board, it would be the same measurement. But if you're just starting and you need a way to warp without spending money for a warping board, this will work. So the next thing we have to do is tie off the cross. I have another scrap piece of yarn, and what I will do, I'm trying to pull my guide string down and out of it. But right here is where my cross is. And I'm going to take the yarn and go down and around this cross right in the middle of it. Again, I'm trying not to get this guide string caught because I need that for my next warp. Just tying it loosely, it doesn't need to be tight. Then I'm going to tie off each of the legs of the warp. This is identical to what you would do with a warping board. Keeps your cross contained until you get it to the loom and you beam it without tangling it up. Then I'm going to come up the warp, I don't know, 20, about 30 inches, and I'm going to put on what's called a choke tie. This is to keep all these warp threads in perfect order while I'm getting it on the loom. This one needs to be tight. This is the only one that has to be tight so that the threads don't move at all. And when I'm warping the loom, I'll show you why. So I'm going to tie it pretty snug here. And then I'm going to put one more tie right about here. It's just going to help me contain the warp. Now I'm ready to take the warp off of the legs. I'm going to start at the far end and I'm trying to leave my guide string on. And I grab it, twist it here to create a loop, and then pull a loop up through. It's just like crocheting. I'm just slowly going to pull this up by doing a chain like this. It makes the warp shorter and it helps to keep the warp in order. I have another video about warping that I will put a link to at the top in a card as well as the description below. It goes a little bit further into the actual warping process. So now I have my warp chain. I have my cross tied off. This is the end that I want to start with. And it's neat, compact, and ready to put on the loom. I need to make a couple more chains like this. So now that I've shown you how to use a set of chairs as a warping board, I want to show you another tool that is available. This is made by Shacked, and these are called warping pegs. They work fairly similar to what I just did with these chairs. you take, this is your cross end with two pegs on it, and it comes with a couple wing nuts, a couple washers, 2 blocks, and a screw. So you're going to take the block, your washer, and then put the wing nut on, and we're going to clamp this to a table and do another warp using these pegs. So this is the cross end of the shacked warping pegs. What I like to do to protect the table is to use this, it's a shelf liner that is sort of spongy, and it helps stop any movement. So I'll put one piece on top here, this on, then we've got the clamp. So I want to put another piece here at the bottom. The clamp goes through the hole here. I'll cover the bottom of this as I'm screwing it on, so we'll get a nice tight fit without doing any damage to the table. So that's good, it's not going to move around on the table. Then I have the other end of the peg. It's a single peg, same situation, we have the clamp, and I need to measure from these pegs to another point for the length of my warp. I've attached the other peg to a TV tray table. Maybe you can see it there in the distance. I have my yarn that I used before to measure out the 4.5 yards. And then I'm going to attach it to this table. Once again, I want to work with 2 ends at a time so that the warping goes a lot faster. We'll take the 2 ends and tie it to the first peg here. And so just as I did before, I'm going to go to the outside around this peg down here, and when I get to the cross, this one's on this side of it, so I'm going to go on the far side, around, back around, and to this side. So my cross is being created right in here. So I'll do this warp the same way as I did the first one. And the benefits of these pegs are that the threads are going to be measured much more evenly than they were on the chair, because they're not going to end up slipping, and it's straight. So I'll get a better measurement. We won't have any ends that are longer than the other when I'm finished. Hey, you. I've finished counting this warp, and once again, I'm finding the cross here, and I tie off the cross in the middle, and then tie off each leg of the cross. And I'll come down further, and again about 30 inches, and I will tie the choke. Then I'm going to go to the other end and make it into a braid. I ended up splitting this warp into 3, so it's approximately 500 ends. And that'll make keeping the tension a lot easier when I put it on the loom. And we will continue tomorrow and put it on the beam.